A black CEO is ignored by a waiter. The next day, the restaurant owner begs him for a meeting. Before we begin, leave a comment telling us which city you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. David was a man accustomed to being seen. As the CEO of Aura Innovations, a company that had gone from a scrappy startup to a tech behemoth in less than a decade, his presence was a force to be reckoned with. Boardrooms hushed when he entered, and investors hung on his every word. He had a quiet charisma that didn't demand attention, but commanded it nonetheless. He was a strategic thinker, a master negotiator, and a visionary who could see not just the next quarter, but the next decade. He was, in short, a man who had earned his place at the table. But tonight, that place felt very, very empty. He had chosen the Gilded Spoon for his solo dinner. It was a restaurant that prided itself on its understated elegance, its muted color palette, and a reputation for impeccable service. He had heard the stories: a sommelier who could predict your wine preference with unnerving accuracy, a waitstaff that moved with the grace of trained dancers, and a chef who could make a simple roasted chicken taste like a revelation. It was exactly the kind of quiet, sophisticated sanctuary he needed after a week of high-stakes negotiations and the relentless hum of a 1,000-person company. He was seated at a prime corner table, a spot that offered a perfect view of the bustling dining room. The hostess, a young woman with a genuine smile, had been nothing but pleasant. But that was where the pleasantries ended. He had been there for 10 minutes, his menu untouched, his water glass full. The waiter, a young man with a mop of sandy hair and a jittery energy, had swept past his table no less than 5 times. Each time, David had made a subtle attempt to catch his eye, a slight tilt of his head, a gentle clearing of his throat, a hesitant wave. Each time, the waiter's gaze seemed to slide right over him, as if he were a ghost, a flicker in the periphery that didn't quite register. The waiter was a whirlwind of activity. He took an order from a young couple to David's left, their faces glowing in the candlelight. He refilled the bread basket for a boisterous family to his right, their laughter echoing through the room. He even stopped to chat with an elderly woman seated by the window, his posture relaxed, a smile on his face. But David? He was a void, a blank space in the waiter's universe. A prickle of frustration, hot and sharp, began to rise in David's chest. This wasn't a case of being busy. This was a case of being deliberately ignored. Was it his suit? Was there a stain he hadn't seen? No, the fabric was pristine, the cut impeccable. Was it his race? He was a black man in a predominantly white establishment, but this was the 21st century, in a city that prided itself on its diversity. Such blatant disrespect felt archaic, almost unbelievable. The frustration began to curdle into anger. David, a man who prided himself on his patience and his ability to remain calm under pressure, felt his carefully constructed composure begin to crack. He was a man who had built an empire from nothing, who had overcome countless obstacles and prejudices to get where he was. To be treated this way, to be made to feel small and insignificant, was an insult that cut deeper than any failed deal or missed opportunity. It wasn't just about the food, it was about respect. It was about being seen as a person, not a stereotype or an inconvenience. He looked around the room again, the symphony of clinking glasses now sounding like a discordant clatter. The waiter, Marcus, as his name tag read, was now at a table of 4, laughing as he took their order. The laughter seemed to mock David's silent indignation. He watched as Marcus scribbled on his notepad, a picture of attentiveness and professionalism. The contrast between his treatment and the treatment of everyone else in the room was stark, and it was maddening. David decided he had had enough. He wasn't going to sit there and be disrespected. He wasn't going to beg for service. He was a CEO, not a supplicant. He reached into his wallet, pulled out a crisp $20 bill, and placed it on the table. It was more than enough to cover the water he had poured for himself from the carafe, and then some. It was a final, silent statement. A statement that said, "I am here, I have money, and you have chosen to ignore both." He stood up, the chair scraping against the polished floor, a sound that seemed to draw a few curious glances. He straightened his suit jacket, his posture ramrod straight, and walked out of the restaurant. He didn't look back. The cool night air hit his face, a welcome shock after the suffocating warmth of the dining room. He walked past the large glass window, catching a glimpse of Marcus, still laughing with the table of four. The image solidified the injustice in his mind. He hailed a taxi, gave the driver his address, and sank into the back seat, the taste of injustice far stronger than the hunger in his stomach. He didn't know it then, but this seemingly insignificant act of disrespect would be the catalyst for a series of events that would change not only his life, but the lives of two other men forever. The crisp $20 bill was a weight on Marcus's conscience. He'd found it on the table David had occupied, a silent accusation that had sent a jolt of ice through his veins. He had been a blur of motion all night, the clatter of plates and the din of conversations a constant, overwhelming tide. His brain, a finely tuned machine for logistics and order, struggled to keep up with the chaotic visual input of a busy Saturday night. Faces were a jumble, a collection of fleeting features that he couldn't hold on to. He relied on table numbers, on the repetition of a customer's order, on the sound of their voice. But this man, the one with the tailored suit and the quiet intensity, had been a ghost to him. He'd seen the table was occupied, but the person at it hadn't registered as a distinct entity. He had looked, but not seen. The realization hit him with a sickening thud as he cleared the table after David had left. The untouched menu, the full water glass, the $20 bill, it all came together in a wave of shame and regret. He knew he had messed up, but he didn't understand how badly until he saw the look on Marco's face. His father, the owner, had been watching from the kitchen pass-through. His gaze was a silent question, a mix of concern and disappointment that Marcus had come to dread. "That man," Marco said, his voice low and strained as he pulled Marcus aside. "He's a regular. He's one of the most respected people in the city. He comes here to relax. And you ignored him." Marcus's throat went dry. He had no excuse. No easy answer. He couldn't tell his father what was really going on in his head, the tangled mess of signals and the constant struggle to appear normal. He just mumbled a pathetic apology and went back to work, the weight of his father's disappointment heavier than any tray of drinks. Later, as he was closing up, the shame lingered. He couldn't shake the image of the $20 bill, a small fortune left for no service at all. He felt a desperate need to make it right, but he had no idea who the man was. He didn't know his name or where he lived. All he had was a vague memory of a dark suit and an air of quiet power. His father, however, knew more. He had recognized the man. He had seen the way he carried himself, the way he held his head high. Marco had made a name for his restaurant by treating every customer like a king, and to see his own son so utterly fail at this fundamental principle was a blow. He knew the man's name, David, and he knew he was the CEO of Aura Innovations. Marco, a man who had built his life on hard work and personal relationships, was a man of action. He knew he couldn't let this go. He had to apologize, to make amends. He wrote a note, a heartfelt, messy scrawl on a napkin. He put his name and number on it, an open invitation to a meeting, a plea for understanding. He gave it to Marcus, a silent command to find the man and deliver it. But Marcus, in his shame and panic, couldn't do it. The man was gone. The moment had passed. He was just a ghost, a memory. The napkin felt like a burning coal in his pocket. He wanted to throw it away, to pretend it had never happened. But he couldn't. It was his father's plea, his own chance at redemption. He finished his shift in a daze, the napkin folded neatly in his jacket pocket, a constant reminder of his failure. He was so rattled that he barely said a word to his father. He just nodded, packed his things, and left. He got on the bus, staring out the window at the city lights, a silent film of his failure playing on repeat in his mind. He got home, a small studio apartment above a dry cleaner, and sat on the edge of his bed. The world outside was quiet now, the city's pulse finally slowing down. But inside his head, the chaos raged on. He took off his jacket, the weight of the day pressing down on him. He felt for his phone, and that's when he found it. The napkin, a crumpled square of paper, a testament to his failure. He pulled it out, smoothing it out on his thigh. On the back, in his father's rushed scrawl, were the words, Marcus, 555-0123. Marco had signed his son's name, a final, desperate plea for his son to take responsibility. A plea that had gone undelivered. The weight of his father's trust, and his own failure to live up to it, was suffocating. Marcus stared at the name and number, his father's bold, looping letters a stark contrast to his own shaky, careful handwriting. He felt a new wave of shame, not just for ignoring the man, but for letting his father down. He had been a disappointment. He had been given a simple task, and he had failed. He put the napkin back in his pocket, a silent promise to himself that he would find a way to make it right. He had no idea how or when, but he knew, with a certainty that was both terrifying and comforting, that he couldn't let this go. He had to face the man. He had to explain. He had to apologize. He owed it to his father and to himself. The phone rang, its shrill tone cutting through the quiet of David's penthouse. He glanced at the caller ID, an unknown number. He considered ignoring it. He had a policy of not answering calls he didn't recognize, a habit born of years of dealing with cold callers and persistent journalists. But something, a flicker of intuition, made him hesitate. He picked up. The voice on the other end was gruff, weathered by years of early mornings and late nights. "Hello? Is this David?" The voice asked, a tremor of nervousness beneath the rough exterior. "This is he," David said, his voice a low, even baritone, the kind of voice that instantly commanded attention. "Who's this?" "My name is Marco," the voice said, and David's mind immediately went back to the $20 bill and the sense of deep injustice he had felt the night before. "I'm the owner of the Gilded Spoon." David's jaw tightened. "I see." The words were clipped, cold. "I'm not sure what there is to discuss. I left a generous tip for a service I didn't receive." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line, and David could almost hear the man's heart pounding. "Please, sir, don't hang up," Marco said, his voice a raw plea. "I'm not calling about the money. I'm calling about my son. About what happened last night." The mention of the son caught David off guard. He had assumed the call was about a complaint, a plea for a better review, or a defensive tirade about the restaurant's policies. He hadn't expected a personal admission of fault. "Your son?" David asked, the ice in his voice beginning to melt, replaced by a flicker of curiosity. "Yes, Marcus. He was the one who didn't see you." The words were heavy with a burden David couldn't yet comprehend. "I'm so sorry. I'm not calling to make excuses, but to explain. He has a condition. We don't have a name for it yet, but it makes it hard for him to recognize people, to see them, especially when he's under pressure." David was silent, the pieces of the puzzle he hadn't known he was trying to solve suddenly clicking into place. The blank stare, the way Marcus had looked right through him, the frenetic energy. It wasn't disrespect. It was a disability, an invisible one. The anger that had been simmering in his gut for hours began to dissipate, replaced by a profound sense of empathy. He had made a judgment call, a swift, emotional one, and he had been wrong. "He's a good kid," Marco continued, his voice thick with emotion. "He's the best thing I have. He's brilliant with numbers and systems. He redesigned our entire inventory system. But people, they're a blur to him. A constant, confusing blur." David closed his eyes, picturing the restaurant, the blur of people moving in and out, the controlled chaos. To someone who couldn't process faces, that must have been a living nightmare. He thought of the crumpled napkin with the name and number, a silent plea for connection, for understanding. It wasn't a taunt. It was an apology. "I tried to get him to find you," Marco confessed, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I wrote my name and number on a napkin. I begged him to give it to you, but he was so ashamed he couldn't." A new question formed in David's mind. "How did you get my number, then?" "I asked around. I have friends in the industry. I described you. A man in a tailored suit, a man who commands a room, a man who looked like he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. One of my contacts knew you. They told me who you were. The CEO of Aura Innovations. A man who builds things. I was hoping you could help me, that you could build a solution for my son." David was taken aback. This wasn't a simple apology. This was a cry for help. A father, desperate to find a way to help his son, saw a man who had built a successful tech company and saw a glimmer of hope. He saw a man who had been wronged, and instead of defending his son, he had chosen to expose his vulnerability, to put it all out there on the line. "I need to speak with you," Marco said, his voice laced with a raw, desperate urgency. "I need to show you what he's capable of. I need you to see him, not as the man who ignored you, but as the boy who needs help. I'm begging you for a meeting." David, the man who had walked out of the restaurant in a cloud of righteous indignation, felt a profound shift within him. The injustice he had felt had been a misunderstanding. The disrespect he had perceived had been a symptom of an invisible struggle. He no longer felt angry. He felt an overwhelming desire to understand, to help. He had been looking for a place to unwind, and he had found something far more profound. A purpose. "I'll be there," David said, his voice soft but firm. "I'll be there this afternoon." He hung up the phone, a new sense of purpose coursing through him. He was no longer just the CEO of a tech company. He was a man who had been given a chance to right a wrong, to help a father and a son who had been dealt a difficult hand. He had gone looking for a good meal, and he had found a new direction. The air inside the Gilded Spoon was thick with the scent of garlic and rosemary, but for David, it was the heavy atmosphere of a confession booth. He sat at the same corner table where he had felt so invisible the night before. This time, however, he was not alone. Marco, the owner, sat across from him, his hands clasped on the table, his face a roadmap of worry lines. He looked older, more tired than he had sounded on the phone. "Thank you for coming," Marco said, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't sleep at all last night. I was so worried. I knew I had to talk to you. I had to make you understand." David nodded, his gaze steady and reassuring. "I appreciate you calling, Marco. I was angry, I won't deny it. But your call, it changed things. It made me realize there was more to the story." Marco took a deep breath, and the story began to pour out of him. It was a story of a father's love, of a son's silent struggle, and of a world that wasn't built for people who saw it differently. "Marcus, he's been like this since he was a boy," Marco began, his eyes glazing over with a mixture of sadness and fondness. He could build anything with Legos. He could solve the most complicated puzzles. But people, they were always a problem. He couldn't remember faces. He couldn't put names to them. As he got older, it got worse. The stress of school, of trying to be like everyone else, it took a toll. Marco explained the countless doctor's visits, the misdiagnosis, the dead ends. They had been told it was social anxiety, a learning disability, a form of autism. But nothing ever quite fit. No one could give them a definitive answer, a name for the silent struggle that defined Marcus's life. "He's not a bad kid," Marco pleaded, as if David needed convincing. "He's the best of me. He's kind, he's brilliant. He can't see people. Not in the way you and I do. To him, you're a collection of clothing, a voice, a presence. But a face? A face is a blur. A constantly shifting image that his brain can't latch onto." David listened intently, the anger he had felt the previous night now a distant, foolish memory. He thought about Marcus, the frantic energy, the way he had moved through the restaurant like a man trying to outrun his own shadow. It wasn't rudeness. It was a coping mechanism, a way to navigate a world that was a constant, confusing puzzle. "When he started working here, I thought it would be good for him," Marco confessed. "It's a structured environment. He knows the tables, he knows the orders. He can manage. But on a busy night, the visual input is too much. The stress, it's overwhelming. He panics. He goes into a kind of fugue state, where he's just trying to survive. He didn't ignore you, Mr. David. He didn't see you. He couldn't see you." David's heart ached for both father and son. For Marco, who had to watch his son struggle, and for Marcus, who was trapped in a world where the simplest human interaction was a monumental task. He understood now. The $20 bill wasn't an act of defiance. It was an act of despair. Marcus had left it, not to taunt him, but as a silent apology. "I believe you, Marco," David said softly, his voice full of genuine empathy. "You don't need to apologize anymore. I was wrong to assume. I'm sorry for walking out." Marco's eyes, which had been downcast for most of the conversation, finally met David's. A glimmer of relief, of gratitude, shone in them. I wanted you to know," Marco said, his voice thick with emotion. "I wanted you to know that he's not a bad kid. He's a good kid who's struggling. And I'm just a father trying to help his son." He paused, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn photograph. It was of a younger Marco, beaming, with a small boy on his shoulders, his face a perfect, innocent replica of the man sitting across from David. "That's him," Marco said, his voice filled with pride. "That's my Marcus." David looked at the photograph, at the smiling boy, and the blur of the waiter from the night before finally coalesced into a person. A person with a past, a present, and a future that was defined not by his struggles, but by his potential. The anger was gone. The frustration was gone. All that remained was a sense of profound understanding and a growing desire to help. He had come looking for an apology, and he had found a mission. As the final words of Marco's confession hung in the air, David felt a profound sense of understanding. The anger and frustration that had fueled his initial reaction were completely gone, replaced by a deep well of empathy. He looked at Marco, the man's weary face a testament to years of quiet struggle, and knew he had to do more than just offer a polite apology. He had to help. "Marco," David said, his voice soft yet firm. "Tell me more about Marcus's inventory system. You mentioned he's brilliant with numbers and systems." A flicker of pride, the first genuine emotion David had seen from him, lit up Marco's eyes. It's incredible," he said, the words tumbling out with a new enthusiasm. "I'll show you." He led David through the bustling kitchen, a world of organized chaos that smelled of simmering sauces and fresh-baked bread. They went into a small, cluttered office in the back, where a single computer sat on a messy desk. Marco cleared a space and pulled up a program on the screen. It was a digital dashboard, a meticulously organized map of the restaurant's entire operation. "He built this," Marco said, his hands sweeping over the screen. "He spent months on it. Every ingredient, every bottle of wine, every plate and fork, it's all in here. He can tell you exactly how many ounces of olive oil we have left just by looking at a number. He can predict our stock needs for the next month with a 99% accuracy rate." David, a man who had built a career on understanding and appreciating good software, was genuinely impressed. The interface was clean, intuitive, and remarkably efficient. Marcus hadn't just built a database. He had built a predictive model. He had created a system that didn't just track inventory, but anticipated demand. This was a level of genius that went far beyond what was required for a small, family-owned restaurant. "He has a mind for patterns," Marco explained, his voice filled with a father's admiration. "He sees things in a way that no one else does. The chaos of the dining room, that's a nightmare for him. But the chaos of data? That's his playground. He sees the patterns, the connections. He can predict what we'll run out of before we even know we need it." Marco then showed him another program Marcus had developed. It was a new system for table assignments and order tracking. It wasn't a visual system, but a logical one. Each table had a number, and each order had a code. Marcus had created a way for the front and back of the house to communicate with simple, numbered inputs, eliminating the need for constant, face-to-face interaction. "He increased our efficiency by 30%. Marco said, his voice brimming with pride. "The time it takes to get an order from the table to the kitchen has been cut in half. And the errors, they're almost non-existent now." He designed a system that works for him. A system that doesn't rely on faces or eye contact. David sat there, staring at the screen, a new picture of Marcus forming in his mind. He wasn't the flustered, disrespectful waiter from the night before. He was a visionary. He was a brilliant mind trapped in a world that was a constant, confusing blur. David realized that he, too, had been blind. He had looked at Marcus and seen a waiter, a service worker. He hadn't seen the genius beneath the surface, the mind that was capable of building a world of order out of chaos. "He's a different kind of visionary," David said, more to himself than to Marco. "He sees the world not through people, but through systems, through logic, through numbers." Marco nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "Yes," he whispered. "That's exactly it. He's brilliant with systems. But people are a blur. A beautiful, confusing, terrifying blur." David's mind, the mind of a tech CEO, began to whir. He saw not a problem, but an opportunity. He saw a way to help Marcus, not by trying to fix him, but by building a bridge between his world of logic and the world of human interaction. He saw a way to create a technology that could give Marcus what nature had denied him, the ability to see and connect with people. He saw a solution, and for the first time since he had sat down at that table, he felt a surge of excitement. The injustice of the night before had led him to this moment, to this understanding, to this mission. He was no longer just a wronged customer. He was a man with a purpose. He had a vision, and he knew, with a certainty that was both exhilarating and terrifying, that he was the only one who could bring it to life. After listening to Marco and seeing the undeniable proof of Marcus's brilliance, David's mind was racing. He wasn't just a CEO anymore. He was a problem solver, and this was a problem of a different, more human kind. He leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table, a new kind of intensity in his eyes. "Marco," he began, his voice low and deliberate. "I think Aura Innovations might be able to help." Marco's face, etched with a lifetime of worry, looked at David with a mix of hope and disbelief. "Help? How?" "My company has been developing a cutting-edge facial recognition and augmented reality software," David explained. "It's not for security. It's for accessibility. We've been working on a project to help people with various visual processing conditions. It's a technology that can identify individuals and then overlay information in real time." He painted a picture for Marco, a world where Marcus could wear a lightweight pair of glasses that weren't just spectacles, but a window into a more ordered world. The glasses camera would scan a person's face, and the software would instantly process it. A small, discrete display inside the lens would identify the person, maybe by name or with a simple tag like Table 7 Customer. The glasses could also link that person to their order, their preferences, or any other information Marcus needed to provide excellent service. "It's a way to give him a human-centric interface," David said, his voice building with excitement. "His brain processes logic and systems beautifully. Our software would simply provide him with the logical data he needs to interact with people. It wouldn't fix his condition, but it would give him a tool to navigate the world. It would give him his vision back, in a sense, a vision that is tailored to how his brain works." Marco was speechless, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and wonder. It sounded like something out of a science fiction movie. A technology that could bridge the gap between his son's brilliant mind and the confusing chaos of human faces. "We could let him be the first to test it," David offered, his words a lifeline. "My team could work with him, tailor the software to his specific needs. We could use your restaurant as our beta testing ground. It would be a partnership. We help Marcus, and in return, he helps us refine our software for others like him." Tears welled up in Marco's eyes, a torrent of emotion that had been held back for years. He thought of all the doctors, all the dead ends, all the times he had watched his son struggle, and now, here was this man, a stranger who had every reason to be angry and frustrated, offering a solution that was not just a hope, but a tangible, real possibility. I don't know what to say," Marco stammered, his voice choked with emotion. I can't thank you enough." "Don't thank me yet," David said with a small smile. "This is a big project. It will take time, and it won't be easy. But I have a good team, and I have a good reason to do it." He looked around the restaurant, at the empty tables and the quiet kitchen, and a new picture formed in his mind. He didn't just see a place where he was ignored. He saw a place of purpose, a place where a father's love and a son's genius could finally be understood and celebrated. He had come here looking for a simple dinner, and he had found a new direction, a new mission, and a new kind of partnership that went far beyond the bottom line. It was a partnership of humanity, of understanding, and of hope. The weeks that followed David's offer were a whirlwind of controlled chaos. The back office of the Gilded Spoon, once a repository for old paperwork and dusty ledgers, was transformed into a temporary R&D lab. Wires snaked across the floor, monitors flickered with lines of code, and the air hummed with the quiet intensity of engineers on a mission. David's team, a small, hand-picked group of his best minds, worked tirelessly to adapt Aura Innovations' cutting-edge software to a single, crucial user, Marcus. The challenge was immense. They weren't just building an app, they were building a bridge between two worlds. The software needed to be more than just a facial recognition tool. It had to be an intuitive assistant. It needed to be fast, reliable, and discreet. The goal was not to make Marcus feel like a cyborg, but to give him a seamless extension of his own cognitive strengths. The first step was to design the hardware. David's team settled on a pair of sleek, lightweight glasses that looked like a modern, minimalist version of a regular pair of spectacles. The tiny camera was almost invisible, nestled in the corner of the frame. The augmented reality display was a small, transparent overlay on the lens, visible only to the wearer. The software was the real masterpiece. It wasn't just about identifying faces. It was about creating a system that understood the context of a restaurant. When Marcus looked at a customer, the glasses would instantly process the face, link it to the table number, and pull up any relevant information: their order, any allergies, their name if it had been entered into the system. A subtle, almost imperceptible verbal cue, a tiny whisper in a bone-conducting earpiece, would give Marcus the information he needed without distracting him from his work. Marcus, for his part, was a willing and eager participant. He spent hours with the team, explaining his struggles, his triggers, and the mental systems he had already developed to cope. He showed them how he memorized table numbers, how he used the color of a person's shirt as a temporary anchor, and how he relied on the sound of a voice to guide him. His insights were invaluable, and the engineers, who had only ever worked on abstract problems, found themselves inspired by the humanity of their work. Finally, the day of the trial arrived. David was there, sitting at the same corner table, a silent witness to the culmination of weeks of hard work. He watched as Marcus, wearing the prototype glasses, walked onto the restaurant floor. At first, there was a visible tension in Marcus's shoulders. He moved with the same hesitant, almost skittish energy as before, his eyes darting around the room, trying to make sense of the overwhelming visual input. But then, something changed. As a family of four was seated at a table, Marcus approached them, his gaze no longer vacant but focused. David saw a small flicker on the inside of the lens, a private message only Marcus could see. "Hello," Marcus said, his voice no longer rushed but calm and confident. "Welcome to the Gilded Spoon. I'll be your waiter tonight. Can I start you off with something to drink?" The family, used to the typical hurried greeting, was pleasantly surprised. Marcus took their order with an ease and grace that had never been there before. He didn't have to look at his notepad. The information was already there, a quiet confidence boosting his every move. David watched, a wave of emotion washing over him. It wasn't just a successful tech trial. It was a human triumph. He saw Marcus interact with a customer, a woman who had been a blur to him just weeks ago. He saw him smile genuinely, make eye contact, and engage in a brief, friendly exchange. The glasses weren't just a tool, they were a liberation. Throughout the night, Marcus moved with a newfound purpose. He was no longer a frantic figure trying to outrun the chaos. He was a conductor, gracefully moving through the symphony of the dining room, each movement purposeful, each interaction meaningful. The small, almost imperceptible cues from the glasses were all he needed to connect the faces to the people, the orders to the tables, the chaos to the order he so desperately craved. By the end of the night, the trial was an unequivocal success. Marcus was exhausted, but his face was lit with a joy David had never seen before. He walked over to David's table, not with the hurried, averted gaze of the past, but with a confident stride. "It works," Marcus said, his voice full of wonder. I can see them. I can see the people." He didn't mean it in a physical sense. He meant it in a profound, human one. He could finally connect. He could finally see the individuals, the faces behind the blur, and for the first time in his life, he felt like he was truly part of the world. David looked at him, not just as a successful trial subject, but as a friend, a partner, a man whose life had been forever changed by a simple, but profound, act of technological empathy. The once empty table was now a symbol of a new beginning, a new vision, and a new kind of success. The night of the successful trial felt like a celebration. The air in the Gilded Spoon, which had once been a source of anxiety for Marcus, now felt charged with a different kind of energy, one of triumph and possibility. After the last customer had left, David, Marco, and Marcus stood together in the quiet dining room. The empty tables no longer looked like a battlefield, but a field of new opportunities. It's a miracle, Mr. David," Marco said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've given him a new life." David, who had been watching Marcus beam with a newfound confidence all night, felt a warmth spread through his chest. "It wasn't me, Marco," he said, shaking his head. "It was all Marcus. We just gave him the right tool for his incredible mind." He turned to Marcus. "Your insights were invaluable. You helped us build this. You helped us make it perfect." Marcus, who was still wearing the prototype glasses, looked at David, his face now a clear, distinct image instead of a frustrating blur. I can't thank you enough," he said, his voice full of gratitude. "I finally feel like I can do this. I can be a waiter. I can be normal." "You were never not normal, son," Marco said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You were always brilliant. You just needed the right perspective." Marco, Ever the traditionalist, had an idea. "I want to name a dish after you, Mr. David," he said, a wide grin spreading across his face. "The Aura chicken, or the David's Vision pasta. Something to commemorate this moment." David smiled, touched by the gesture, but he had a bigger idea in mind. "Marco, that's incredibly kind. But I have a better idea," he said, his voice taking on the tone of a CEO in a boardroom, a tone Marcus and Marco had never heard before. "This isn't just about Marcus and your restaurant. This is bigger. This is a revolutionary technology that can help millions of people. It's a new kind of accessibility, a new way of seeing the world." He then laid out his proposal, a partnership. "Aura Innovations will continue to work with you," he explained. "We'll use the Gilded Spoon as our beta testing ground, a living lab to refine the software. We'll gather data, we'll get feedback from Marcus, and we'll turn this prototype into a polished, commercially viable product." Marco and Marcus listened, their eyes wide with a mix of excitement and trepidation. A partnership with a major tech company? It felt like something out of a dream. "And what do we get out of this?" Marco asked, his business sense kicking in. "Everything," David said with a confident smile. "Aura Innovations will help you secure funding. We'll use our connections, our resources, to help you expand the restaurant. We'll turn this into a flagship location, a model for what a truly inclusive work environment can look like." He looked directly at Marcus. "We'll build a system that can train other people with similar challenges, a system that can help them find meaningful, fulfilling work. You won't just be a waiter anymore, Marcus. You'll be a pioneer, a teacher, a leader." The proposal was audacious, bold, and incredibly inspiring. It wasn't just about a business deal. It was about a movement. It was about using technology for a purpose far greater than profits. It was about creating a world where people weren't defined by their disabilities, but by their unique abilities. "So," David concluded, his voice full of passion, "what do you say? Do we have a deal?" Marco, a man who had spent his life building a small business with his bare hands, looked at his son. He saw not the struggling boy he had worried about for so long, but a confident, capable young man with a bright future ahead of him. He saw a chance to not only secure his son's future, but to help countless others. He extended his hand. "We have a deal, Mr. David," he said, his voice firm and resolute. "We have a deal." As they shook hands, the three men, a tech CEO, a restaurant owner, and a young man with a new kind of vision, sealed a partnership that was born out of a misunderstanding, forged in empathy, and built on the shared belief that with the right tools, anything was possible. The night that had started with a $20 bill and a feeling of injustice had ended with a handshake and a promise to change the world. The journey was just beginning. The grand reopening of Marco's and Marcus's was more than just a party. It was a testament to the power of human connection, understanding, and the transformative potential of technology. The restaurant, once a place of elegant understatement, now buzzed with a vibrant energy. The old, somewhat stuffy decor had been replaced with warm, inviting lighting and modern, minimalist furniture. The new sign, Marco's and Marcus's, hung proudly above the door, its two names a symbol of the partnership that had been forged in a moment of misunderstanding and grown into a shared vision. The funding David had helped secure had allowed for a complete renovation. The kitchen was state-of-the-art, and the dining room was now a seamless blend of classic charm and modern efficiency. But the most significant change wasn't in the decor. It was in the atmosphere. The entire staff had been trained on the new system, and many of them, like Marcus, were people with unique neurological profiles who had struggled to find work in a traditional service environment. The restaurant was a hub of inclusivity, a place where people's different ways of seeing and understanding the world were not just tolerated, but celebrated. At the center of it all was Marcus. He was no longer the flustered waiter David had first encountered. He was the general manager and head of operations, a confident, charismatic leader who moved through the packed dining room with the grace of a seasoned professional. He wore a slightly more refined version of the glasses, a discreet piece of technology that gave him a superpower, the ability to see people not just as faces, but as individuals with names, preferences, and stories. The subtle cues from the glasses gave him the data he needed, but his interactions with the customers were all him. He was attentive, charming, and genuinely engaged. David, sitting at his usual corner table, watched with a swelling heart. He saw Marcus walk up to a young couple, his face lit with a warm smile. The glasses gave him the data. Table 4, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, celebrating their anniversary. And Marcus, with that information as his guide, made a connection. "Happy anniversary, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson," he said, his voice as smooth and confident as David's own. "It's an honor to have you back with us." The couple's faces lit up, and David knew, with a certainty that went beyond any financial gain, that this was the most important work he had ever done. Later, as the night wore on and the celebration reached its peak, Marcus came over to David's table. He no longer needed the visual cues to identify David. Their faces had been burned into each other's memories. He took off the glasses and placed them on the table. "I wanted to thank you," Marcus said, his voice full of genuine emotion. "For everything. For seeing me when I couldn't see you. For believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." David looked at the young man, at the confident eyes and the warm smile, and a wave of pride washed over him. "You did this, Marcus," David said, his voice soft. "You were always capable. I just helped you find the right lens to see the world with." He paused, then added, "You said I gave you your vision back. But you gave me something too. You gave me a purpose, a direction. You showed me that technology isn't just about making money. It's about making a difference. It's about building bridges, not just products." The restaurant was a living, breathing example of their shared philosophy. It was a place where technology and humanity coexisted in perfect harmony. It was a place where a father's dream for his son's future had come true, and a place where a man who had felt invisible had finally been seen. The grand reopening wasn't just a business milestone. It was a personal triumph for every person in the room, a testament to the fact that a single act of empathy could change the world, one person and one restaurant at a time. The new sign above the door wasn't just a name, it was a promise of inclusivity, of understanding, and of a future where everyone, regardless of their challenges, had a place at the table. The air was filled with the warm, rich scent of freshly baked bread and simmering sauces, but tonight, the food was almost an afterthought. The real sustenance came from the conversation, the laughter, and the shared sense of accomplishment that filled the air at Marco's and Marcus's. David was no longer a CEO, he was a friend. He sat at his favorite corner table, the one that had once been a symbol of his invisibility and now served as a testament to the power of human connection. Across from him sat Marco, his face no longer etched with worry but with a deep, abiding contentment. And next to him, beaming with a quiet confidence that had been hard-won, was Marcus. "You know," Marco said, raising a glass of a rich, full-bodied red wine, "I thought my life's work was this restaurant. I thought my legacy would be a perfect sauce or a perfectly seared steak. I was wrong. My legacy is sitting right here with me." He looked at Marcus with a profound love that brought a lump to David's throat. "And you, Mr. David," he added, his eyes full of gratitude. "You helped me see that. You showed me that a good meal is just a small part of a bigger story." Marcus, now fully at ease, looked at David. "I still can't believe it sometimes," he said, taking off his glasses and placing them on the table. "I still remember that night. The feeling of being completely overwhelmed, a feeling like I was failing my father, failing myself. I thought I was just a bad waiter. I never thought I was a pioneer." David smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached his eyes. "You're a pioneer, Marcus," he said. "You're a living, breathing testament to what's possible when we stop trying to fit people into a mold and start building a world that fits them. This restaurant is more than just a place to eat. It's a proof of concept, a beacon of hope." They spent the next few hours talking not about the past, but about the future. They spoke of the new partnerships that were forming, of other restaurants and businesses that had heard their story and wanted to implement similar technologies. They spoke of a nonprofit they were starting, an organization that would help people with cognitive challenges find meaningful employment. Marcus, with his keen mind for systems and data, was already sketching out a business plan on a napkin, his handwriting now confident and clear. "We can't just stop here," Marcus said, his eyes alight with passion. "There are so many people like me. So many people who have so much to offer, but are just invisible. We can change that. We can show the world that diversity isn't just about race or gender. It's about how we see the world. It's about how we think." Marco, ever the pragmatist, was already thinking about the logistics. We'll need to find the right people, he said. The right trainers, the right businesses. This is a huge undertaking. I have a good feeling about it, David said, his voice full of the quiet confidence that had built his empire. Our story is powerful. It's a story of a misunderstanding that became an understanding, an injustice that became a justice, an empty chair that became a table full of friends. People want to be a part of that story. They want to believe that good can come from bad, that a simple act of empathy can change everything. He looked around the restaurant one last time, at the warm lighting, the happy faces of the staff, and the quiet contentment of the patrons. He thought back to that first night, to the cold sense of injustice and the gnawing hunger. Now he was full of a sense of purpose, of friendship, of a new kind of success that went far beyond the bottom line. He had gone looking for a good meal, and he had found a new life. He had found a family, and he knew, with a certainty that was both humbling and profound, that he was exactly where he was meant to be. The empty chair at his table was gone, replaced by a shared meal, a shared dream, and a shared future that was brighter than any of them could have ever imagined.